We're going to start by singing this. It goes like this. We're going to come back to that one in a little while. My name is Cantor Sarah Grabiner. I think it's intentional that they only put people who are not rabbis after Rabbi Dr. Deborah Cohn-Harris's talk, just so that there's no question about any of the kind of qualifications or expectations of what it means to be a rabbi. So you're going to hear from a couple of non-rabbinic faculty of the Leo Baeck College. So I teach liturgy here at the college, as well as serve as a cantor at a number of North London Reform congregations. And today, my mission is to share a bit about the expanding sense of musical diversity that we might embrace. I think this is a talk inspired by a moment of merging in the movements, by this 100 years of the World Union, really thinking about where we might be heading next, what might be the next levels of diversity, and also inspired by this space, by the library, by the treasures, whether they are liturgical, textual, but just by the sense of expansion of knowledge. So we've got a bunch of Siddurim. We're going to start with a Piyyut, which actually is only in forms of prayer. So if you turn to page 196 in forms of prayer, and hopefully there are enough there for everybody to see a copy of Forms of Prayer. Page 196. We've got to get this one in while it's still technically morning, whether astrologically, halakhically, liturgically, whatever the definition of morning might be, because it's a dawn poem. And it's a dawn poem written by a paitan, a writer of liturgical poetry, from Morocco in the 16th century, whose name also allows us to honor one of our rising second-year students, Shemaya. Brilliant, there he is at the back. So Rev Shemaya Kosson. Shemaya Kosson was a paitan, a writer of liturgical poetry in 16th century Morocco. So I think not our Shemaya, but perhaps a namesake. And we know very little about him. But he wrote this poem, which is unique in so many ways. It's addressed to the soul, mainly, as opposed to being addressed to God.
Explain it intentionally, not everybody has the same verbal techniques.
Yeah. We've got diversity out there of Siddurim. We might have a couple of more forms of prayer. Do we have any more forms of prayer? But we can always pass them around. Most of the texts we're going to use are in both prayer books, but this is the only one that's just in forms of prayer. So this poem, which is addressed to the soul, is quite unique as opposed to be addressed to God. So it starts with a refrain, I shall give thanks to God who searches the heart when the morning stars sing together. But then each of the verses addresses the neshama, the soul, simu lev el ha-neshama. And it really is a kind of a ode to the soul. Now, one of the things that means is that grammatically, the gender of the soul in Hebrew is female, neshama. So the fact of the grammatically female gender of the soul means that we get a whole load of odes in the female grammatical gender. Now, I'm not trying to claim that in 16th century Morocco, this was like a proto-feminist liturgical innovation, not in the slightest, but the pure sense of what different formulations of Hebrew grammar can do for us is an invitation for us to take this text and imagine what is it like to sing with more female conjugated grammatical moments than we often get. The other thing I'll just name, and it's a shame that it's not included in our Siddur, is that they've actually taken out a verse that's about the soul laying tefillin and being wrapped in a talit. So we get this address to the soul to put on tefillin and wrap herself in a talit, which is such a phenomenal image, and again gives us an invitation to put on tefillin and be wrapped in a talit in female grammatical conjugations. Again, it's because of the gendered nature of the Hebrew language, but it's a phenomenal image. They took it out of this Siddur because here it appears in the Shabbat morning service. So they said it wouldn't make sense to have a verse about putting on tefillin in the Shabbat morning service because on Shabbat we don't lay tefillin. But what we lose is this beautiful image of the soul laying tefillin every Shabbat morning. So we're going to experiment with hearing two different melodies. As I said, it's written in 16th century Morocco. And so it clearly comes from a Mizrachi community in its origin, but that says nothing about the ways in which it might be sung. So we'll start with one melody. It goes like this. I'm going to do it again. לבב חוקר, ברון יחד, כוכבי בוקר. We're going to learn it together. This is the refrain. Odeh la'el. Let's just do that. Odeh la'el, לבב חוקר. So that whole line, let me sing it first. Odeh la'el, levav choker. Odeh la'el, levav choker. Beron yachad. Beron yachad, kochvei voker. So the second half. Beron yachad, kochvei voker. Beron yachad, kochvei voker. We'll sing the whole thing. Odeh la'el, levav choker. Beron yachad, kochvei voker. I'll share the verse with you. It sounds similar. Simu level haneshama leshem shevo ve'achlama ve'ora ke'or hachama shivatayim ke'or voker odeh la'el levav choker beron yachad kochvei voker mikisei chavod chutzava lagur be'eretz Ara לפנות בוקר, אודה לאל, לבב חוקר, ברון יחד, כוכבי בוקר. So many stanzas, and as I said, some are included here, some not, awakening the soul for the morning. So that's a melody that comes from the Algerian Jewish community. Not so surprising, written in Morocco in the 16th century, being used in the North African communities. So a melody that comes from Algeria. Many of the melodies that I'm going to teach today that are from Mizrachi and Sephardi communities, I learned from my teachers, Yahala Lachmish and Chaim Lachmish, who are both paitanim, singers of liturgical poetry in Jerusalem, and Yahala, who is a wonderful leader of egalitarian music in Jerusalem communities, says that she's never been to Algeria, but they must have really beautiful mornings, because they seem to write a lot of very beautiful dawn melodies. And so I agree. I've also never been to Algeria, but would love to experience sunrise in Algeria because of how beautiful their morning melodies are. So this text from 16th century Morocco makes its way to Europe, to Eastern Europe, and is also deeply embraced by Hasidic dynasties. And so a melody that particularly comes out of the Breslauer dynasty, probably being sung either in the early morning or possibly as a kind of Shabbat afternoon text. A lot of the texts which in Mizrachi communities are sung first thing in the morning are also sung on Shabbat afternoon in Ashkenazi communities. So this is a Breslauer Hasidic melody for that same text. Oh, let's try it. Oh, levav choker, beron yachad, beron yachad, beron yachad, beron yachad, beron yachad, beron yachad, kochvei voker, kochvei voker. We can do it a little higher. Oh, let's try that together. Oh, levav choker, beron yachad, beron yachad, beron yachad, beron yachad. Then it's going to end kochvei voker. We'll do that together. Kochvei voker. So quite a different energy to a way to start the morning. Is apparently how dawn sounds for the soul in Algeria versus in the Breslauer community. We have a similar text. We have a text which has a clear origin story in one part of the Jewish world, but can be sung by our communities everywhere. And that is the story of so much of our liturgy. Some of our liturgy is genuinely shared by all in its origin. When we think about liturgical, biblical texts, so Psalms, we all inherit the Psalms in the same moment of our community's moment of origin. If you were to start a new dynasty or sect or community of Jews praying around the world in this moment, which is happening, as we know, in the World Union far and wide, they could open the Tanakh and start writing melodies. But some of these Piyyutim have an author, and that author might bring with them a particular Eidah, a particular historical, geographical, ethnic origin. So what happens to those texts is even more interesting musically. So we're going to look at a few that all have a similar narrative, a similar story, and that's because they were all written in that magical moment in Sfat in the 15th and 16th century at a moment of huge diverse mixing of Jewish communities. So let's go to Yedid Nefesh. It's on page 109 in Forms of Prayer, 109 in Forms of Prayer. If you're holding on to Lev Chadash, and you are feeling connected to Lev Chadash in this moment, you can find it on page 78. So 109, if, I was going to say in the red book, but I think lots of them are red. 109 in this one. Well, actually, let's go to 648 in Lev Chadash, because then you get the whole thing. So if you've got a book that looks like this, go to 648. 648 so that you can see the whole thing, or 109 in Forms of Prayer. So a few of our Shabbat Piyyutim written in, as I said, that moment of great liturgical creativity, the fact that the whole Kabbalat Shabbat service is not even 500 years old in terms of its real establishment in the synagogue is wild, completely wild. The Baruchu and the Shema and the Amidah are written about in Mishnah in the year 200, and yet something which we hold so dear, Lecha Dodi, beginning Shabbat with psalms and songs, only really gets going after the publishing of these pamphlets in mid-16th century. They're published generally in Venice, but we know that they're written in Sfat. So the other thing, musically and culturally, that's wonderful about this moment is that it's already a time of great cultural mixing. How have people arrived in Sfat? Well, generally they've come for two different reasons. Either they got kicked out of the Iberian Peninsula in 1492 and have been slowly making their way across Europe, generally as part of kind of Ottoman trade routes, or they might have come down through Europe from what's going on in Poland, kind of golden age, just the beginnings of a real rise of the kind of 16th century, what's going to become the 17th century Hasidic dynasties. But they're interested in what's going on in these hills outside, a couple of hours north of Jerusalem, and they see that something exciting is happening. Coinciding with the printing press, technology, and also languages that are spoken by many more people than ever before. So all of this leads to this amazing moment in Sfat where a liturgical innovation takes hold and is adopted by all different communities. So when we look at Yedid Nefesh, it's not owned in the same way as the medieval Spanish poetry by Sephardi communities, or by the Ashkenazi German early Piyyut that's written in the Rhineland. This is a text which in its origin story belongs to the entirety of Jewish peoplehood. So that nigun which we began with is a Moroccan melody for Yedid Nefesh. We'll remind ourselves of it and then see how it goes. Let's do it again. After me, Yedid Nefesh of HaRachaman, Yedid Nefesh of HaRachaman, Meshoch Avdach El Retzonach, Meshoch Avdach El Retzonach. Yes, some of the endings are different to what's in your book. We're going to live with it and maybe talk about it later if we need to. Meshoch Avdach El Retzonach, Meshoch Avdach El Retzonach. Let's do that again. Yedid Nefesh of HaRachaman, Meshoch Avdach El Retzonach. Yedid Nefesh of HaRachaman, Meshoch Avdach el retzonach. We do it twice. Yedid nefesh al harachaman, meshoch avdach el retzonach. Yedid nefesh al harachaman, meshoch avdach el retzonach. Yarutz avdach kehemo ayal. Yarutz avdach kehemo ayal. Let's just try that again. Yarutz avdach kehemo ayal. Then the one line which isn't call and repeat. Yishtachaveh mol hadarach. Yishtachaveh mol hadarach. Let's do it again. Yishtachaveh mol hadarach. So the call and response style in Mizrachi Piyyut is not because nobody knows the tune. It's a choice about the texture and the notion that we hear and respond, that we hear different voices from community, that different people might sing out and others might respond. Let's try the whole thing. Yedid nefesh al harachaman, meshoch avdach el retzonach. You repeat that. Yedid nefesh al harachaman, meshoch avdach el retzonach. Yedid nefesh al harachaman, meshoch avdach el retzonach. Together. Yedid nefesh al harachaman, meshoch avdach el retzonach. Yarutz avdach kehemo ayal. Together. Yarutz avdach kehemo ayal. Yishtachaveh mul hadarach. Yishtachaveh mul hadarach. Then we're going to sing together. This melody might be a little familiar. It goes like this. Ki ye'erav lo yedidutach minofet suf v'chol ta'am. Ye'erav lo yedidutach minofet suf v'chol ta'am. Again. Ye'erav lo yedidutach minofet suf v'chol ta'am. Ye'erav lo yedidutach minofet suf v'chol ta'am. Ye'erav lo yedidutach minofet suf v'chol ta'am. Familiar melody for many. Does anybody know who by whom or when that melody was written? I know that Clive wrote me a beautiful essay about it, so I know that he knows. Ehud and Sarah Zweig, this couple, who are pretty much famous only for this melody. It's not clear that they really wrote pretty much anything else. Ehud and Sarah Zweig entered this melody into the second annual Hasidic Song Festival in Jerusalem in 1970. Now, let me just tell you, there was nothing Hasidic about the Hasidic Song Festival. There was an extant Israel Song Festival that had been going since 1960. And they thought maybe it would be nice to have some religious tunes. And so they started the Hasidic Song Festival, which basically just meant liturgical melodies. So the winner of the first Hasidic Song Festival in 1969 Oseh shalom bimrama. Nurit Hirsch, a writer of Israeli folk music, a lover of Israeli folk music, wrote this setting for Oseh Shalom in 1969, won the first competition. And in 1970, one sec, James, Ehud and Sarah Zweig set this Piyyut, Yudid Nefesh, and win the competition. So this heritage of the so-called Hasidic Song Festival, again, most people not in any way religious, but culturally, intimately connected to these texts. So Nurit Hirsch in 1969, and then Ehud and Sarah Zweig with Yudid Nefesh in 1970. Similarly, a young couple writing this waltz setting. And which has become sung in so many communities, either with Israeli connections or with kind of broadly folk Ashkenazi traditions, because that was pretty much where they came from. There are other settings, but the idea that we have a Moroccan melody, which most certainly predates Ehud and Sarah Zweig, even though it's very difficult to know exactly the provenance of some of the Mizrachi tunes, testifies to the fact that it was being sung definitely in non-Ashkenazi communities as part of the early morning bakashot, the petitionary prayers, long before it entered Friday night in our communities. I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure we get to the Iberian Peninsula, because we don't exactly have World Union communities in North Africa, although halavai, maybe someday we will have a World Union community in North Africa, or actually even Sfat. I think we're yet to found an IMPJ shul in Sfat, but maybe we will someday. Let's turn to page 104 in Forms of Prayer, or 76 in Lev Chadash. We're not going to get to our, I've got about 25 Lachadodis we could sing, so we're not going to do that. But we'll end with a little Shalom Aleichem moment, partly because it's Thursday, which means in Jerusalem people are already saying Shabbat Shalom. And to think about what it sounds like to take Iberian folk songs to embrace the music of different parts of the Jewish world and sing them all together. So let's just imagine this. Quando el Rey Nimrod, the Ladino folk melody, Avram Avinu, some people know it as, written for a folk song, but used in so many places. The word for in Hebrew, when you take a melody and use it for a different text, is one of my favorite words, halbasha. You dress it up. You dress up a text in a different melody, from lehalbish, to get dressed. So we've dressed up Shalom Aleichem as Quando el Rey Nimrod, and in a very similar sound for any musicians out there in the same kind of musical mode, this place of Rabbi Israel Goldfarb, a conservative rabbi in Brooklyn at the beginning of the 20th century, wrote this melody for Shalom Aleichem, which has become so ubiquitous in Ashkenazi communities. He wrote it in the year 1918. So again, not at all old in some ways, and at the same time feels much, much older perhaps than it really is. There's a wonderful cantorial argument where there are letters between cantors in the 1920s because somebody claimed it was like a folk melody. Then we have his letters writing. Pinchas Spiro says this is a folk melody. We've got Israel Goldfarb's letters writing to Pinchas Spiro saying it's not a folk melody. I wrote it sitting on a bench outside the library of Teachers College at Columbia University on a Friday afternoon in 1918. And his specificity kind of wins the day. And he says, I came up with this melody and it was Friday afternoon, so I thought I'd set it to Shalom Aleichem. So we have those letters, which are a wonderful gift in our kind of musical, historical, musicological discoveries. The sound might be similar, the rhythm might be different, but the way in which we welcome Shabbat angels can come together. And this kind of mixing of the sound of the Jewish people, the sound of Jewish peoplehood from around the world is something that I've definitely been learning a lot about in the last, 5, 10, 15 years. Again, I'll just name Yahala Lachmish, who's the musical leader of a community in Jerusalem called Sion. She's really one of the pioneers of this kind of mixing. So I've learned a huge amount from her on my journey through this music. I've got pages with links to all these tunes. If this is the kind of thing that you like, I'd love to give you all of the things we didn't get to sing, as well as the ones that we did, with links to good musical recordings, because it can be hard to find musical recordings of some of these melodies that we can really learn from. It's been a joy to sing with you. I think there's another opportunity for 5 minutes for some coffee or a loo before we hand over to Dr. Keith Khan-Harris. Early Shabbat Shalom, and we'll sing ourselves out with a little nigun. Feel free to get up and go and grab some coffee, grab whatever you need. Bucket